Welcome to Life on the Rocks, your innovative entrepreneurship and motivational based show where we ask the real questions by tapping into the minds of successful, high-performing individuals. I'm going to predicate to you that luck is an illusion, disproving the myth that there's a such thing as an overnight success. Get ready and strap in 3, 2, 1.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are coming at you live from episode 55 of Life on the Rocks with your host, Connor Rocques. Today's featured guest in the hot seat is Mr. Stephen Paiken. How are you today?
I'm grand. Happy to be with you.
Absolutely. It's an absolute pleasure to have Mr. Paiken on the show. For anybody who currently doesn't know Stephen is actually a Canadian journalist. He's also the anchor of The Agenda with Steve Paiken. He has authored seven books. You think one is enough, but I mean 7 is quite a bit to be able to write. That takes a lot of time. He's also was the moderator last week of the provincial leadership debates. So co-moderator
with Farah Nasser.
With Farah Nasser, okay, so co-moderator. So I want to start off. What got you started off as a journalist?
You know, I know the moment it happened. I mean, I've always been sort of a curious person, but I remember in my first week at U of T. This is going back to 1978 now.
Oh wow!
University of Toronto. Classes actually hadn't started yet. There's a place called Hart House, which is sort of an historic old building. And I walked in, and there's the debate club table, the chess club table, the photography club table, the archery club table, and there was another table that just said U of T radio.
Oh, wow.
And Connor, I'm not kidding you, a light went on in my head, and I said, I think that's something I want to explore. Okay. And it all started with that. I went and I did play-by-play for the varsity blues hockey and football.
Oh, wow.
I did twice weekly sportscasts.
Okay.
And the guy I did all that with was a guy named Michael Landsberg.
Oh, no kidding.
Who,
wow.
25 years at TSN.
On the is it off the record?
Off the record.
Wow, that's incredible. So you must be obviously a big sports fan.
I am, yes.
I want to ask you. So being obviously a journalist and being on air all the time, like, have you always been an extrovert or are you an introvert? Because I know you got to ask kind of engaging questions.
You know, I don't spend any time at all thinking about that kind of stuff.
You just show up for the job and...
It doesn't, as odd as this sounds, I'm far more interested in the outside world than what's going on in here.
Oh, no kidding.
So I don't spend any time thinking about whether I'm an introvert or an extrovert. I just am interested in the world.
Oh, I believe it. Yeah, just curious. So, I mean, obviously you deal with your show, The Agenda, you're dealing in current affairs and stuff like that. Do you guys have a selection of how you bring on guests, or you just see current affairs coming up that are trending, you want to bring people on to kind of engage? I've watched your style a number of times in interview. You're very analytical. And I want to ask you, how do you break down arguments when you're sitting on the table and being able to engage and throw them back? I kind of use an example. You're similar to a lawyer, not in a way that I like how you would take down someone's argument and then you're able to counter. You're really good at it, I found, studying you.
Well, they say that a lawyer shouldn't ask a question that he or she doesn't already know the answer to. So I'm not like a lawyer in that respect.
In that respect, yeah.
A lot of the times I'm asking questions I don't know what the answer is. You know, I'm asking the question because I genuinely want to find out the answer. But the way it works on our program is that people, you know, we've got a team of producers, and we all pitch story ideas to the executive producer. I pitch ideas as well. The executive producer considers all the pitches and then decides, okay, we'll do this, that needs more work, not interested in that. And off to the races we go.
Oh, absolutely. I find it fascinating. Like, how is it being a TV personality? I mean, you must go out in public, people must recognize you. I mean, you guys obviously get quite the amount of viewers. Like, how is it being a TV personality, like kind of jumping into that spotlight? Is it something you don't think about, maybe?
And that you are right. I don't really think about that. I don't know what to say. I mean, I know that obviously when I go out in public, many people are nice enough to come up and say hello and ask me about something they saw on the program, or ask me a question about, you know, some of the questions that you're asking me here.
Absolutely.
How do you get a show on the air? Or how do you, if I've got a topic I'm interested in, how do I get it on? Yeah, that kind of thing.
That's just an interesting thing. Yeah, no, I was always wondering that kind of context. But crossing gears, so myself, I'm a millennial. I know you bring on millennials on the show.
How old are you?
I'm 24.
24.
Turning 25 next month, so we're kind of in a transition period.
I don't even remember 24.
You don't remember? No.
No.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
I don't know. It's too long ago is what it is.
I can only imagine, yeah. But crossing over, being that I'm in the millennial market, I know I seen actually yesterday, one of my friend's girlfriends was on your show talking about politics.
Who's that?
I believe is her name Alicia Corbin?
Yeah.
Yeah, she was just on the show not too long ago. I seen it air.
PhD student at Queen's, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
She's very bright. Yeah, we talk. She's an expert in political branding, so we were talking about the notion of how do you, you know, in the midst of an election campaign, if things aren't going well, how do you kind of rebrand yourself, or is it, anyway, she's very bright.
I think that's very interesting too. I try not to get political for myself because I don't want to back myself into a corner that I don't know how to get myself out of. But the question I want to ask you, I think it was interesting, is that with the mass disruption in today's world, what is your best advice to students? So obviously millennials and Generation Z, I mean, you see a lot of them, you engage with a lot of them. What is your best advice to some of these students going into the universities and colleges, and if you go out, you don't find a job, like, well, what would you say to some of these students?
Here's what I'd say. I'd say if you really believe in your heart and soul that you were put on this earth, for example, to be a journalist, then you have to pursue that to the nth degree.
So true.
Go to whatever college or university you want to go to get the kind of training and education.
So true.
And what you do in the classroom is only half the game. When I went to university, I also worked at the campus radio station, the campus newspaper. That was for my undergrad. When I went to grad school after that, I had 3 part-time jobs while I was going to grad school, 2 of which had something directly to do with journalism. So it wasn't just learn in the class, but it was learn outside the class as well. And you just have to pursue that as much as you possibly can and give it your all,
So
if that's what you're meant to do. Now, when I went to journalism school, this is back in 1981 now, we had, I think, about 300 people apply for 40 spots
Oh, wow.
in my program.
Kidding.
And I was very lucky to be one of those 40. About halfway through the year, 15 people dropped out.
No kidding.
Here we are, 36, 37 years later?
Years, yeah.
I'm betting you out of the 40 that started that class, there's maybe me and one other kid who are still in journalism. So there's a lot of people who go into journalism just because they're interested in it or they think it might lead to something else, but they don't actually have that burning, deep desire to do it. And that's fine. It's a good place to go and learn how to do some stuff. But if you think this is what you're absolutely positively meant to do, then you just have to pursue it with all your vigor for as long as you can.
So true.
And if it's not, then, play around with it and see what else comes along.
I mean, we live in a great time, right, where you can kind of transition.
Absolutely.
People always say there's no jobs. I say, well, if you can't find one, let's try to create one.
Bingo.
That's the other thing.
That's the biggest difference between when I graduated and when you graduated. Because right now, have you graduated yet?
I did.
You did,
Yeah,
okay.
2 years ago, yeah.
Okay. I know that back when I graduated, the idea was go find a job. And now I know the biggest difference today is if you can't find one, make it yourself.
It's so true.
And you guys can. I mean, you have avenues of technology that, of course,
I know everything.
we barely had VCRs.
I know.
So
If you even know how to work them back then.
that's right.
And that's one of those things, I mean, I always tell students when I'm working with them, I say, your phone is a weapon in the sense that snap of your fingers, you can have, I want to learn about physics, bang, right on my phone.
All of the world's knowledge in the palm of your hand.
Yet it's the biggest distraction device. And that's one of the
Well,
common things where you got to use it properly, right?
That's up to you.
I can only imagine for teachers, this was another question I wanted to ask you, talking about the education system. I mean, I graduated, I absolutely love university, the environment, the teachers. Do you find it problematic though in today's age when they're going into the job market, we're not set up for failure, but in the sense that if you don't have a good game plan, like you don't have that burning desire, you go in general and then you put yourself into debt and then you don't find a job. Like, do you find that the system's a little bit problematic where maybe we should guide students a little bit differently out of high school? What do you think?
I don't know if it's a question of guidance, but I do know that if, for example, we are putting young people into a feeder system that, for example, trains teachers, and if we don't have enough, let's say we graduate 10,000 new teachers at all of our post-secondary institutions every year, but we've only got jobs for 5,000. I mean, we're literally training half the people to be unemployed in the field of their choice. So that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I've always thought that university is not necessarily about drawing a straight line between going in and getting a job. I think university is about trying to become a better citizen. It's about trying to learn how to learn.
So true.
It's about making the contacts that may be helpful to you later in life. It's about making friends. It's about growing as a person. It's about all of those things. And frankly, a 10th on my list would be it's about getting a job.
It's so true.
I think it's meant to give you experience. And like for me, going to University of Toronto, it didn't necessarily, I didn't go to U of T and take Latin and film studies and philosophy and English and French for the purposes of getting a job in one of those fields. I just went to get smarter.
Exactly, yeah.
And it coincidentally, because of the story I told you earlier about Hart House and U of T radio, it coincidentally pointed me towards something I wanted to do for a living.
So true.
So, that's, to me, that's the approach. And then if you know what you want to do specifically, maybe you go to a college of applied arts and sciences after that to get more technical training.
I think that's in the day and age we live in today too. Students, they got to realize at some point they're going to fail. They're going to go into something that might not work. I always actually teach my students. I tell them, I say, you know, it's not a matter of getting into the school or the job you want. It's a matter of when. A lot of the time we go in, we apply once, we don't get in, and we're sitting back. Oh no, and it kind of is a demotivator. But it's just those people that really want it. Like you say, I think it's that keen, like you said, burning desire, similar to what Napoleon Hill says. That's going to kind of push you forward. And that's what happened with me. I studied law, and obviously Laurentian. So I didn't do my LLB, but I studied undergrad in law and communications.
Okay.
And Dr. Braun was one of my favorite professors. He was a great life teacher, or I guess you could say just a great teacher in general. And he told me, he said, go try what you really want. So it was in communications field. I wanted to kind of get out there. And that's what guided me down the path I am now, where I'm starting to get into the entrepreneur field and stuff like that. So that's why it's interesting for you. I mean, you've interviewed so many people. I wanted to get your perspective on that, especially with the education system.
Well, some of the best advice I ever got was figure out in life what you want to love to do, and then figure out how to get paid for it.
Absolutely, yes.
Because you really, if you're lucky, you won't spend your entire life doing something you don't like doing just to cash a paycheck.
It's true.
If you're lucky, you'll find something you absolutely adore. I mean, let's think about it. You're going to spend, 8, 10, 12 hours a day doing something for a long time.
So true.
35, 45, 55 years, whatever it ends up being. It's great if you actually love doing what you're doing.
It's true.
It's miserable if you don't. So find something you love to do, and then figure out how to get paid for it.
Absolutely, it takes some time. You might have to do some free work. That's another point actually with that is, like, I tell students, it's like, well, go volunteer for free. Go in there and work for free, and it might get you in that environment.
Absolutely.
Something I want to talk about with the job field you're involved in. So talk about how, obviously you're in a traditional media field in television. Talk about how that's shifted now. Now that we have our phones and online, like a lot of millennials are just watching YouTube and Netflix.
It is just massively, the industry that I work in is undergoing massive disruption right now.
Crazy.
I give you one little example here. Connor, when I was your age, the Toronto Star was the largest circulation newspaper in the country. It was trading at $150 a share.
Wow.
Today, the Toronto Star is still the largest circulation newspaper in the country, and it trades for about $1.35 a share. It has lost 90% of its book value over the intervening years. And I don't know how that business model survives. And if it doesn't survive, I don't know what we do as a country to ensure the safeguards for democracy are in place, because I think the fourth estate, newspapers, television, radio, magazines, legacy media, digital media, new media, I think it's all part of the mix that helps keep our democracy thriving.
So true.
And if we lose the backbone of all of that, which I think newspapers are, I don't know what the future looks like.
It's so true.
Yeah.
It's one of those things. It's the same with books. Like, anyone can pump out a book nowadays, just online. You can get it self-published. And it's kind of hard. We almost seem that you have this divided line where, what do you even believe anymore online? Because you have all these news networks pumping out a certain amount of content, but then you're looking for what is legitimate.
Well, I still think reputation counts, right?
That's a good point.
I still think that there's something special about reading the Washington Post or the New York Times or the Globe and Mail, or dare I say the Agenda. I mean, there are
Absolutely,
there's certain media properties that really care about empirically provable facts.
So true.
And then there are other media outlets which are bogus and which don't care about the facts and are all into fake news and are pushing an agenda and ideological and so on and so forth. And I still think that what's good and worth supporting out there ultimately will prevail. I don't think anybody knows what the business model of that is yet, but I have to believe that quality matters, accuracy matters, timeliness matters, empirically provable facts matter, writing an accurate first draft of history. I have to believe all that still matters.
Absolutely.
Because if it doesn't matter anymore, then I've wasted 35 years of my life, and I'd like to think I haven't.
No, absolutely. Especially, I think that's a huge point on the fact that, all these reputable news, not articles, I'm talking about news
Outlets?
Outlets, that's the word I was looking for. It's one of those things. So this is actually an interesting point going off that, talking about legitimacy and stuff. How do you deal with some of the controversies being, obviously, if you're a personality online, or not online, but you're a personality on TV? I mean, you see, like, I interviewed Glenn Tebow last week, or a week and a half ago, and he always said, like, a lot of people gets a lot of what we call trolls online. Like, how do you deal with some of these trolls?
It depends. I take two approaches. Number one, if a person is trolling just to be a disagreeable jerk, I ignore all of that. They don't get any time. If a person actually makes good constructive criticism and has something intelligent to say, I absolutely engage with all of them.
That's awesome.
I've only blocked one person ever in my life on Twitter, and the rest of them I say, come on in. Let's try and have a reasonable conversation about stuff.
I think that's great too, because Twitter's one of those things where a gentleman like me, let's say I don't have a big following, I could jump right into the conversation and try to engage.
Yeah.
And that channel is another one where you see the shifts kind of happening, where it's kind of transitioning. I wanted to ask you, so this is an interesting question. Who, and this is obviously an open-ended one, but who would be one of the smartest minds you've ever interviewed? Where you sat across, where when you meet someone and they have that all of a sudden when you hear them talk and they're kind of engaging, who would be one of the sharpest minds, fast, that you've ever spoken with?
Well, there's different ways of interpreting that question. For example, if you're looking for just pure intellectual brain power, Bob Rae, the former Premier of Ontario, Jimmy Carter, the former President of the United States. I mean, these are guys with big, intellectually powerful brains. If you're looking for street smarts, I might be looking in a completely different direction. There are lots of people I interview. I can think of one woman who grew up in supportive housing in Toronto, but who has a kind of a street smarts that a lot of people who maybe have academic smarts would not be able to appreciate. So it's different.
I was going to say, yeah, because I've seen even another gentleman, I don't really study him, I have his books, I've never read them yet, but it's Jordan Peterson. I've seen he was on the agenda, and he's got a lot of controversy.
Jordan was discovered by the agenda. I got news for you.
Really?
Jordan did his first television appearances on the agenda. Wow. One of our producers, a man by the name of Rocques discovered Jordan as an interesting psychiatrist at the University of Toronto, had him come on the program. He started to gain some popularity. Then Rocques used to run something called the Best Lecturer contest, and Jordan used to, I'm trying to remember now whether he participated in it or a lot of his classes were recorded and then put online, and he got more famous.
Big time.
And now, of course, he's massive.
I know, it's wild to see. You always see the two names, and that was a gentleman I was looking online. Have you ever wanted to interview a gentleman like Ben Shapiro? He's someone that really engages.
I know who he is. Yeah, he's around your age, isn't he?
No, Ben Shapiro. Ben Shapiro would be.
Which guy? He's a millennial, isn't he?
No, I think.
Or am I confused?
He was a previous lawyer. He's a big personality in the United States. So him and Jordan Peterson, they do interviews together once in a while.
I thought he was a real young guy. Is he not?
Maybe about 35. I could be wrong.
You millennials all look alike.
I know he looks young. He's a young.
Yeah, he's a sharp young guy.
Really
conservative.
Big time conservative. I'm not saying to promote conservative, but he's one of those guys that sticks to his point. And I'm always, like I was telling you, I'm fascinated with people that you go. Let's say they come in on your show, and they're very fast at going back and forth. And I saw you do that a few times, where you sit in there and you go, here's the point to this. You break down the argument and you put it in front of whoever's sitting there. So that's why I was wondering that because you've interviewed a number of different big people. My apologies on that. Reputable people is what I meant to say.
Yeah, they're big and reputable.
That's awesome. Do you so you guys always are based out of current affairs? Do you ever just have any? You obviously do special shows. I seen you interviewed yourself a number of years ago, back in 2013.
Well, that was a gimmick, just to plug a book. Yeah.
No, absolutely. Yeah, get the book going. But do you ever do you just aim usually to have people on in regards to politics, or just overall?
No. That's the joy of doing the agenda is that it is it's a very eclectic palette. One day we'll be doing politics, the next day we'll be doing psychiatry, the next day we'll be doing labor issues, the economy, social affairs, international affairs, drone strikes in Afghanistan. I mean, just the breadth of the issues that we cover is what makes the job so exciting.
No, absolutely. Do you ever get nervous when you go in and interview some of these people?
Not so much anymore. There's still.
You're a veteran.
Well, yeah. It's I've probably done 25,000 interviews in my time now, so It's going to be. I don't want to say I never get nervous, So election night you might get nervous. The leaders' debate last week with Farah Nasser, that was a little bit of you get a little butterflies in your stomach when you're doing something like that. But for the most part, you have to remember that we tape our program during the day. It's in our studio where I spend half of my day. So it's a very comfortable setting for me. And, if anything drastically goes wrong, we're taping it. It's not live, so throw it out and start again.
It's not too bad.
No, there's nothing too much to get nervous about.
No, absolutely. I want you to walk me through this for a second. So I am in a number of different facets. Talk about getting over that fear. So if you're a student, we're starting out, trying to get over that fear. If you're going to be doing interviews and stuff like that. So I've done now I'm going into this is my 55th. So I've got quite a little bit. I've studied, I studied guys like Larry King. I was studying yourself. Talk about getting over that fear of just engaging with people, because that's something we need in society, especially for students. If they're going out into the public, they want to meet people, network. Talk about how you can get over that fear and fear in general.
I think there's a fine line to be walked between being respectful and being overly deferential. And I've never met I shouldn't say never, I cannot recall having interviewed anybody who wanted me to just kiss their butt, right?
No kidding. Yeah.
They want, most people want a good, vigorous, engaging conversation. Even politicians, I don't think they enjoy an interview that just sort of, I remember joking with Bob Ray once, I said, so what's the first question you want me to ask you? He said something about, not that I would have, but just as a joke. And he said, how about something like, Premier, what exactly is the nature of your genius? Which, he was kidding,
Absolutely.
I was kidding. But over deference doesn't work. Remember, the person you're interviewing is just another human being.
So true.
So just you be yourself and just treat them like they're not the king of the world and
Exactly.
have a conversation.
If you have some questions, you got to ask.
Yeah.
And that was the thing. I have interesting questions I've always wanted to ask you when I was watching your style and different things, and I find it just fascinating to be able to. You've engaged with a number of top tier people in the world, top tier leaders. So I want to ask you, talk about the importance of getting involved in the community and politics, because I mean, like you said, you were doing a number of different things in broadcasting. You were doing 3 different outlets to broadcast. Talk about how important it is to get involved in the community and in the political realm.
Well, those are 2 different things.
Or
I
two.
would say if you're talking about getting involved in the community and being out there, that's crucial if you're going to be a good journalist. I don't know any. I think it's, again, I'm being too categorical here, but let's just say this. I think it's really difficult to be really good at what you do if you sit in your office all day long.
True.
I think you got to get out. That's one thing that I continue to do all the time. Get out, go to political events, talk to people, talk to everybody, read everything, go to different events. I think if you're sitting in your office reading other journalists' accounts of what you need to know about, well, that's fine. That's half of it. Half of it is doing research, but the other half of it is actually doing your own research. Getting on the phone, getting out of the office, talking to people, going to things. I do that. We're in the middle. You and I are talking right now with, what day is today?
Today, 30th.
Okay, so
Wednesday.
we're like 9 days away from the next election campaign. And I know that on June the 7th, I'm going to have to host a 4-hour broadcast on TVO. I can't do as good a job as I need to doing a 4-hour broadcast that night if I've done nothing but sit in my office for the last 27 days.
So true.
I need to get out there, and I do. You got to get out, you got to speak to the leaders, you got to speak to the candidates, you got to speak to the supporters, you got to go to events, you got to see, are 1,000 people showing up at this event or 100? Who's got the momentum at their back? Whose plans are working? Who doesn't have a plan? There are all sorts of things you need to find out. So absolutely getting out there is key.
It's huge. And then even so for the younger generation, you obviously encourage them, I've seen on your show, to get into the political realm, kind of get aware of what's going on. I mean, to make informed decisions.
Well, people come to me often and say, how can I learn about politics? And I will say, boy, do they make it easy. Go to Queen's Park and sit through question period. Go to City Hall and sit through a city council debate.
It's true.
If you're in Ottawa, go to Parliament Hill. Go sit in a committee. Go sit in on question period. Go sit on speeches. The craziest thing is some of the best stuff that I've learned, that I've needed to know for my job, I've learned by wandering around Queen's Park.
Wow.
Bumping into people in the hallways, bumping into people as they come out of meetings, just looking at the names on the walls. There are portraits of former premiers, former politicians, former MPPs. Their names are on the walls. It's a treasure trove of information, actually.
Absolutely.
Because you never know when you're going to do a 4-hour election broadcast, and you're going to need to know that the Liberal candidate in Brantford-Brant is actually a second cousin to a former McGuinty cabinet minister who used to represent Mississauga. Now, I know that because I went to an event in Brant County the other day and talked to her, and in the course of a conversation, that's what she told me.
Wow.
And on election night, when we look at the returns from Brantford-Brant, I'm going to have that little piece of trivia in the back of my head. It may be irrelevant to a lot of people, but I think it's just one of those little value-added nuggets of information that help fill a 4-hour broadcast.
No, absolutely. I mean, that's a long time to go on and engage with people. So I want to ask you about your job, just in general. Like I said, so you're doing a 4-hour broadcast. What are some of the extra things you do? So you're obviously researching all day. You're going out into the community.
Yep.
This is an interesting question. So if you're doing a lot of research, you're very well read. So how do you speed read? Like, so you can get all that information. I mean, you have so much information coming at you. How can you chunk that information fast? Do you have any tips or anything?
Well, it's funny. I was in my hotel last night, and I was just going through websites. I was going through websites of results from previous elections because I want to know, I need to know in the back of my head, how many votes did Glenn Thibault win that by-election by when he ran for the first time? And how many votes did Andrew Olivier win by or lose by in the previous election? And that way I'll have a baseline by which to compare what the returns as they come in the riding of Sudbury on the 7th of June. I'll be able to see how that compares and contrasts. I think Thibault didn't win by very much, if I recall, something like 1,700 votes.
I'm not sure, but yeah.
I think it was something like
Something
that.
like that, yeah.
So on election night, you know, I don't know what's going to happen in Sudbury riding, but
Interesting.
but if whoever wins, let's say Thibault doesn't win and he loses by 5,000 votes, well, that will be a pretty solid indication of, you know, how public opinion has changed.
It's true.
Right there on the ground. So that's the kind of stuff, those are the numbers I need in the back of my head.
Just so you're ready, just in case someone has something
Yep.
bang and then it's right
Yep.
there. I always find that an interesting place. Like some of my teachers, I've always tried to learn how to speed read, just be able to take in as much information as possible. So I always have kind of a wide range of topics and different things.
Mhm.
So the final question I want to ask you, this is super important. How come I've never seen you do a TED Talk yet? I was looking online. You seem like the perfect candidate.
I've never done one, maybe because I've never been asked.
Never been
I
asked.
don't think I've been asked, but you know, I don't know. I don't know. TED Talks, I mean, you've got what, 17 minutes is it? Or?
17, yeah, 17
Yeah, something like
minutes.
that. I don't know. Never been asked.
Never
How's
been
that
asked.
for an answer?
Okay, that's a good one. Yeah, I've applied a few times, and I just thought you'd be an interesting character to bring onto a platform like that. I want to ask you too. This is another thing, just relating to a personal thing. What do you think of gentlemen like Tony Robbins? I have an insider tip, and you might find this interesting, that he's going to be running for the next president of the United States.
For which party?
I'm assuming Democrat.
Okay.
I remember he said something about Hillary Clinton about a year and a half ago, or maybe about 2 years ago. I seen in an interview. He said, "Yeah, I'm going to be voting for Hillary." But that's what I actually heard as an insider tip. So, what do you think of a gentleman like that, overly powerful?
Well, let's put it this way. I think one thing that Donald Trump proved is that you don't have to have any experience at all in politics in order to get elected president of the United States. Tony Robbins, to the best of my knowledge, doesn't have a heck of a lot of experience in politics. But he is famous, and a lot of people, I guess, follow him and what he does and swear by his success. So who knows?
So true. Yeah. I always was just wondering because I know he's, like you said, he's got a big following, very famous.
Yeah.
So I've actually been to two of his not seminars, but kind of he did some speeches in Toronto and they were incredible.
Right.
Just some of the physiology manipulation things he does. Who are some of the role models you've looked up to, obviously in your career, and a number of different things that you kind of try to mimic, or not mimic, but use some of their techniques and things into your own everyday life?
I don't know that I actually do any of that.
Oh, okay.
I like to think that I'm just me.
I like
And
that.
I don't think I consciously pattern myself after anybody else. But of course there were people I watched over the years who I liked and respected, and who knows, maybe subconsciously pattern myself after. I don't think so, but you never know. There was a guy named Ted Koppel who did a program called Nightline for, I don't know, 25 years or so. It started in 1979 when the Americans were held hostage in Iran. His show started then and just kept on going and going. I know one of the kind of joys of my career was actually getting a chance to interview Ted Koppel. He had a book out, and I had a chance to interview him, which was very enjoyable because I've been watching him on TV since I was 19 years old. So he'd be one guy. You know, Barbara Frum hosted a program on CBC News back in the day called The Journal. I liked him. You know, strangely enough, I know you guys are all, you know, Jimmy Kimmel and Conan and Jimmy Fallon. And,
Used to be Letterman too at one
okay,
point.
Letterman. Back in my day, it was a guy named Johnny Carson.
Oh.
Johnny Carson hosted The Tonight Show for 30 plus years, and he was the king of late night. And Johnny, unlike the late night host today, Johnny actually used to have a lot of authors on, a lot of people with a lot of intellectual heft, and I watched him interview them as well. I used to watch Johnny from the time I was about 13 years old. And he was a comedian, of course, but he was more than that. He also knew how to interview people, so I probably picked up a few tips from him along the way as well.
You see people, like a lot of these comedians I find, they're able to engage. I see them live on stage. Even like Jay Leno was supposed to be very sharp at what he does, and that's the thing. They're making it funny, but they're also able to say, oh, well, what about this? I find that interesting. I honestly got to say, though, that was the last question I had to ask, and I think you've done an exceptional job, and it's an absolute pleasure to have be able to interview you, Steve. Honestly, thank you so much for coming on my show.
It's good to see you again.
And you know what? I'm going to be waiting for the TED Talk one day. And I'll be waiting for it. I'll send you an email. And I'm like, oh, I knew it was going to happen.
Okay, good.
Thank you very much.
I'll be waiting to see what mark you make on the world, too.
I appreciate
Look forward
that.
to it. You look like you're a bundle of energy and can't wait to get out there.
That's where I'm starting.
Okay,
You guys can find Steve on the Agenda, Channel 2. The Agenda with Steve Paiken, current affairs, as well online at Steve Paiken on Twitter. That's correct.
At Paiken.
Oh, it's Paiken.
Yeah, at Paiken, and website tvo.org. All our shows are archived at tvo.org, so you can watch it. If you don't like TV, and if you're one of these millennials who only watches things on their phone or their iPad, go there.
Thank you very much. I'll just get my little clicker. It's actually the first time we're using the little tripod. There we go.
Cool.
Thank you so much for coming
Not
on the
at
show.
all.
Can I get a photo with you quick?
Yeah,
too?
sure.
Appreciate that. Oh,